Welcome to PSY 318, Study Session 2, Conceptual Models of Abnormality. Introduction. In science, the perspectives used to explain phenomena are known as models or paradigms. Each model spells out the scientist's basic assumptions. It gives orders to the field under study and sets guidelines for its investigation. Each model gives what the investigators observe as well as the questions they ask, the information they seek, and how they interpret this information. In the contemporary world, several models are used to explain and treat abnormal functioning. The biological model sees physical processes as the key to human behavior, while the socio-cultural model examines the effects of the society and culture on individual behavior. In between are four models that focus on more psychological and personal aspects of human functioning. They are psychodynamic model, which looks at people's unconscious internal processes and conflicts. The behavioral model emphasizes behavior and the ways in which it is learned. The cognitive model concentrates on the thinking that underlies behavior and the humanistic. Existential model stresses the role of the values and choices in human functioning. None of the models are complete in themselves. Each focuses mainly on one aspect of human functioning, and none can explain all aspects of abnormality. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. List the models of abnormality, and 2. Explain the models of abnormality so listed. Pretest. 1. What are theories of abnormalities? 2. Explain the determinants of abnormality as conceptualized by the biological perspective. 3. List other models of abnormality. Content. The biological model. The biological theorist adopts a medical perspective. They view abnormal behavior as an illness brought about by malfunctioning parts of the organism. Typically, they point to a malfunctioning brain as the cause of abnormal behavior, focusing particularly on problems in brain anatomy or brain chemistry. Biological researchers have learned that psychological disorders can be related to the problems in the transmission of messages from neuron to neuron. Studies indicate that abnormal activity by certain neurotransmitters can lead to specific mental disorders. Certain anxiety disorders, for example, have been linked to low activity of neurotransmitter, gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA. Schizophrenia has been linked to excessive activity of the neurotransmitter, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Mental disorders have also been found to be related to abnormal chemical activity in the body's endocrine system. Endocrine glands located throughout the body work along with neurons to control such vital activities as growth, reproduction, sexual activity, heart rate, body temperature, energy, and response to stress. The glands release chemicals called hormones into the bloodstreams, and these chemicals then propel body organs into action. During stress, for example, the adrenal glands located on top of the kidney secretes the hormone cortisol. Abnormal secretions of this chemical have been tied to anxiety and mood disorders. A change of other factors can contribute to biological dysfunction, from head injuries to poor nutrition to vascular diseases, which may affect the flow of blood to the brain. 3 sources of biological abnormalities have been identified: There are genetics, evolution, and rural infections. Genetics. Abnormalities in the brain anatomy of chemistry are sometimes the result of genetic inheritance. Studies suggest that inheritance plays an important role in mood disorders, schizophrenia, and mental retardation. Evolution. Many of the genes that contribute to abnormal functioning are actually the result of normal evolutionary principles. Evolutionary theorists argue that we can best understand why people behave the way they do, why certain genes are inherited, by examining their evolutionary history. The millions of years during which the human species evolved from DNA sludge to upright primates. The theorists believe that various human reactions and the genes responsible for them have survived over the course of time because they have helped individuals to thrive and adapt. For example, people who were particularly sensitive to danger, those with greater fear response, were more likely to survive catastrophes. These three parts of personality are often in some degree of conflict. If the ID, ego, and superego are in excessive conflict, the person's behavior may show signs of dysfunction. A healthy personality is one in which an effective working relationship and acceptable compromise has formed among the three forces. The behavior model. Behaviorists concentrate on behaviors and propose that they develop in accordance with the principles of learning. These theorists hold that three types of conditioning, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and modeling conditioning, account for all behavior, whether normal or dysfunctional. The goal of behavioral therapies is to identify and replace them with more appropriate ones, using techniques based on one or more of the principles of learning. The classical conditioning approach of systematic desensitization, for example, has been effective in treating phobias. Behaviorists believe that many learned behaviors help people to cope with daily challenges and to lead happy, productive lives. However, abnormal behaviors can be learned. In operant conditioning, for example, humans and animals learn to behave in certain ways as a result of receiving rewards, which is any satisfying consequences whenever they do so. In modeling, individuals learn responses simply by observing other individuals and repeating their behaviors. In the third form of conditioning, classical conditioning, learning occurs by temporal association when two events repeatedly occur close together in time. They become fused in a person's mind, and before long, the person responds in the same way to both events. Viral infections and abnormal behavior. This is another possible source of abnormal brain structure or biochemical dysfunctioning. Schizophrenia may be related to exposure to certain viruses in utero before birth. Researchers have linked viruses to anxiety, mood disorders, and psychotic disorders. The psychodynamic model. The psychodynamic theorists believe that a person's behavior, whether normal or abnormal, is determined by underlying psychological forces of which he or she is not consciously aware. These internal forces are described as dynamic, that is, they interact with one another and their interaction gives rise to behavior, thoughts, and emotions. Abnormal symptoms are viewed as a result of conflict between these forces. The psychodynamic model was first formulated by Viennese neurologist Sigmund Freud. 1856 to 1939. At the turn of the 20th century, Freud developed the theory of psychoanalysis to explain both normal and abnormal functioning. Freud believed that three central forces shape the personality: instinctual needs, rational thinking, and moral standards. All these forces operate at the unconscious level, unavailable to immediate awareness, and he believed them to be dynamic or interactive. Freud called the forces the ID, the ego, and the superego. The ID. The ID denotes instinctual needs, drives, and impulses. The ID operates in accordance with the pleasure principle. That is, it always seeks gratification. Freud believed that children's instincts tend to be sexual from the very earliest stages of life. A child's pleasure is obtained from nursing, defecating, masturbating, or engaging in other activities that he considered having sexual overtones. Also, a person's libido or sexual energy fuels the ID. The ego. A part of the ID separates off and becomes the ego. Like the ID, the ego unconsciously seeks gratification, but it does so in accordance with reality principle, the knowledge we acquire through experience, that it can be unacceptable to express our ID impulses outright. The ego, employing reason, guides us to know we can or cannot express those impulses. The ego develops basic strategies called ego defense mechanisms to control unacceptable ID impulses and avoid or reduce the anxiety they arouse. The defense mechanisms include repression, denial, fantasy, projection, rationalization, reaction formation, displacement, intellectualization, undoing, regression, overcompensation, sublimation. The superego. The superego grows from the ego as we learn from our parents that many of our ID impulses are unacceptable. We unconsciously adopt or introject our parents' values. We identify with our parents and judge ourselves by their standards. We develop a conscience. When we uphold their values, we feel good. And when we feel guilty, when we go against them. We develop a conscience. When we uphold their values, we feel good. And when we feel guilty, when we go against them. Developmental stages. Freud proposed that at each stage of development, from infancy to maturity, new events and pressure challenge individuals and require adjustments in their ID, the ego, and the superego. If the adjustments are successful, they lead to personal growth. If not, the person may become fixated or entrapped at an early stage of development. Then all subsequent development suffers, and the individual may be headed for abnormal functioning in the future because parents are the key environmental figure during the early years of life. They are often seen as the cause of improper development. The first 18 months of life is referred to as the oral stage. 18 months to 3 years of age is the anal stage. 3 to 5 years is the laphic stage, while 12 years to adulthood is the genital stage. Children whose mothers consistently fail to gratify their oral needs may become fixated at the oral stage and display a character marked by extreme dependence or extreme mistrust. Such persons are particularly prone to develop depression. The cognitive model. According to the cognitive model, we must understand human thought in order to understand human behavior. When people display abnormal patterns of functioning, Cognitive theories point to the cognitive problems, such as maladaptive assumption and illogical thinking processes. Cognitive therapists try to help people recognize and change their faulty ideas and thinking processes. The humanistic existential model. The humanistic existential model focuses on the human need to successfully confront philosophical issues such as self-awareness, values, meaning, and choice in order to be satisfied in life. Humanists believe that people are driven to self-actualize. When this drive is interfered with, abnormal behavior may result. One group of humanistic therapists, the client-centered therapist, tries to create a very supportive therapy climate in which people can look at themselves honestly and acceptingly. First, opening the door to self-actualization. Another group, the Gestalt therapist, uses more active techniques to help people recognize and accept their needs. According to existentialists, abnormal behavior results from hiding from life's responsibilities. Existential therapists encourage people to accept responsibility for their lives, to recognize their freedom, to choose a different course, and to choose to live with greater meaning. The sociocultural model. The sociocultural model looks outward to the social forces that affect members of the society. Some sociocultural therapists emphasize the family system, believing that the family structure or communication pattern may force members to behave in abnormal ways. Still, others look at cultural background, social network, and support other societal conditions to see what special issues they may pose. Finally, some theorists focus on societal labels and roles. They hold that society calls certain people mentally ill, and that the label itself may influence how a person behaves and is responded to. Posters. 1. The perspectives used to explain phenomena are known as dash. 2. Cognitive behavioral approaches include dash, dash, and dash. 3. Dash focuses on the biological and physiological conditions that initiate childhood disorders. End of study session 2. Thank you for listening.